What's up, everybody? Today we're working on this 2011 Hyundai Sonata and we're fixing a coolant leak on it. We diagnosed this car last week and figured out the coolant leak was actually coming from this part right here. This is your heater core, okay? So it's kind of like a tiny little radiator, and your radiator fluid or your engine coolant or whatever you want to call it goes through this heater core in one of these tubes, runs through this whole thing, and then runs out the other side. And this thing is inside your dash, so whenever you turn the heat on, the blower motor inside your dash pulls air across this heater core and heats the air up, and then it blows it into your car, and that's what heats your car up. Now this thing is on the car is leaking, and she's running out of coolant every single day, so it's leaking pretty bad. So we're gonna go ahead and replace this. The problem is this is such a tiny piece, but you have to take the entire dash apart. I'm talking about you gotta take the radio out, you gotta take the glove box out, you gotta take the instrument cluster out, you gotta take, I mean, everything on this car has to come out in order to get to this. So this is about a 6 or 7 hour job. It was quoted at 7 hours because you do have to break apart the AC and recharge it and everything. So that added an extra hour. So this is about a 7 hour job. Let's see if we can get it done in time today and see if we run into any hiccups. Okay, so just a little bit of backstory on this car. We've been fixing coolant issues on this thing for a couple of weeks now. And every time we get one fixed, a new issue pops up somewhere else, okay? So like the first time we came out here, it was a bad thermostat. You know, the thermostat was stuck closed. So I replaced the thermostat, and then after that, it started leaking out of the thermostat housing. So there's another part kind of behind the thermostat where it was like starting to crack, and it started leaking after I fixed the thermostat. So after it was leaking for a little while, I replaced that whole thermostat housing assembly. It's a big plastic thing. You can only get it from online or from Kia or something like that. And after that, it started leaking behind the water pump. There's a water pump. There's like a water outlet pipe that goes from the water pump over to the side of the engine, and I replaced the seals on that, so it stopped leaking there. And then it was, according to the customer, it was working fine for about a week or two. You know, no leaks, no coolant issues or anything. And then it started leaking again, and she was running out of coolant, almost going through 1.5 gallons a day. So she was running out of coolant really, really quick. And I figured out that the just from talking to her and getting to know, like, okay, it smells like coolant whenever the heat's turned on. You know, it runs out of coolant like really quickly, and the only place it's leaking from is out of this AC drain tube. So it has to be the heater core, right? So looking back now, there's another major issue on this car that it didn't have any symptoms of, in my opinion. I didn't notice any symptoms, at least. But looking back now, it's painfully obvious what's wrong with this car. You can probably guess it now. If you can guess it, go ahead and put it in the comments. If you can't guess it, stick around to the end of the video, and I'm going to let you know what happened. All right, check this out. We even had to take off the windshield wipers and the windshield wiper valence and everything just to get to these two bolts right here. And the reason we got to get those two out is because if you come to the inside, that's them right there, and then one inside here. And that's holding this whole crash bar up on here. And we got to get this thing out before we can even get to the heater core. So we had to take all that apart just to get to those two bolts. Once I took this valence off, I can actually see down in here to the cabin air filter. All right, now this is a good example. Cabin air filters are not always just a scam that the mechanic shop is trying to sell you on. These things are pretty important, okay? So check this out. Look at that. So that's actually, the cabin air filter is in there, and that's a rodent's nest that's built on top of it, okay? Now, I don't want to show you that for too long because it's pretty gross, but if you change your cabin air filter out, you can catch this sometimes, and you can continue to like disrupt them building nests. If you disrupt them and everything, they're probably not going to stay around. They're going to go find somewhere else to hide, something that's not your car. But if you just let them stay in there and get comfortable, they're going to stay there. So now we got everything taken apart. We're about halfway done with this job. I'm gonna go ahead and take a break. I'm gonna go get some lunch real quick. And I'm also gonna get her a new cabin air filter and everything. We're right at about 4 hours now, so a little bit behind schedule of where I would like to be, but I've also been making like 4 or 5 different videos and shorts and reels and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, that's probably where most of that time went, was just going straight into making this content. All right, so we just got back from lunch. So we're gonna go ahead and start taking everything apart and replace this heater core. But before we do that, I wanna get all this debris out of this cabin air filter compartment. I wanna take the cabin air filter compartment apart and then make sure that there's no damage or anything like that and replace this cabin air filter. Now, normally, you don't have to take all this out in order to replace your air filter, okay? So it's right behind the glove box. All you gotta do is just take a glove box out. You can find plenty of videos online about that for your particular vehicle. Once you do that, you'll see this little tray right here. This just opens up, and that's your cabin air filter right there. So this is right behind your glove box, but since we've already got this thing out, we're gonna take it all apart and basically do it the hard way, just to make sure that there's no real damage or anything in here. Okay, so now I got the clean air filter in here. I got the whole thing put back together. I did take all of the components out and clean them really good because it was really gross. So I didn't want to film any of that, okay? I know I personally watch a lot of YouTube whenever I'm eating lunch or dinner or something like that. And just out of respect for you guys, I don't want y'all to have to experience that. But I did clean it all out. Now, luckily, the old air filter was intact, which means that the rodents had not gotten down into the blower motor area or anything like that. So that's a good sign. There was no real damage done to this thing. It was just pretty gross, so we cleaned it. Now, the next step we're gonna do is we're gonna unscrew this heater core and we're gonna take the old one out and put the new one in, and then we can get started on reassembly. All right, so here's where this heater core is leaking at. It's leaking at this joint here. You can see all that calcification, all that buildup on there, on both sides, and at this joint up here. All right, so that's most likely where it was leaking from. Now, sometimes when you have leaky heater cores, they're leaking so bad that if you put any coolant at all in the car, it's just gonna leak right out. That was not the case with this one. These leaks are so small and so gradual that it had to get all the way up to temperature, and then the thermostat had to open, and then it had to even heat up a little bit more to build up some pressure in there before it started leaking out. And it was a really slow drip. That's why this lady was still able to drive it for a little while, fill it up, drive it for a little while, fill it up, because it wasn't overheating because it was such a slow leak. Don't always think that it's gonna be just gushing out of here. Sometimes it's a real small pinhole just leaking a little bit. And we can't forget to replace these O-rings for this AC line. Okay, so we got a little bit of a problem before we start putting this stuff back together, all right? It's just me here today, I'm by myself. So all these wires and everything, this whole wiring harness is gonna just be a huge pain to handle that and put the dash back in and then put the rail back in and all this kind of stuff. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take all this, and I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna electrical tape it. Got some electrical tape right here. And I'm just gonna tape it to this metal right here underneath the windshield. And I'm gonna tape it all up. That way it's all out of my way. I can put the box in, and then I can put the rail in. And once I got the rail in, I can untape it and start resituating all the wires right where they need to go. All right, so I know that doesn't look a lot better, but trust me, when we go to put this stuff back in here, that's gonna make it a lot easier to install. All right, so now that I get this in, before I start tightening this rail down, I'm gonna start going through and rewiring and rerouting all these wires and connectors throughout here. So fingers crossed, this is where taking pictures comes in handy whenever you're taking stuff apart, or in my case, videos. All these are, it's kind of hard to remember where everything goes, so finger crossed I get it all right. All right, so while I'm working on the wiring and everything, I went ahead and got my AC vacuum pump hooked up and got my gauges hooked up, so it's drawing a vacuum on there, so I can let that start drawing and get all the humidity and the moisture and everything out of that AC system while I'm putting everything else back together. That'll save me a little bit of time there. All right, so now that we got all these wires tucked away, got them rerouted and all plugged in as much as we can, it's time to go ahead and start putting this dash pad back on. Now the hardest thing about getting this dash pad in is gonna be this little sensor right here. So this sensor sits on the top of the dash pad all the way back here, and this wire plugs into the bottom of it from underneath this dash pad. So the hard part's gonna be making sure this wire stays out of the way of these vents, making sure that we're able to get it into that little hole where this thing fits into, and then get it plugged in. We're gonna have to do all that while reaching all around this dash pad and everything. So that's gonna be a pain, but ain't nothing we can't handle. So now that we have this dash pad reinstalled, we got it all bolted down and everything, we can go ahead and start putting in stuff like the radio, the bezels, the air vents, the AC controls, the instrument cluster right here. Basically everything that makes this car look like a car can actually start going in now. Alright guys, sorry about the lighting, but it got really dark out here on us really quick. So I've got the dash put that together, got everything back in place, bolted back up, wired back in like it's supposed to be. I even got the windshield wiper valence and the windshield wipers back on. And now before we plug this battery back up and go to start it, we got to make sure that we put coolant back in this engine, because remember we drained it at the beginning of this project. So we're going to put coolant back in this engine, and then we're going to start it up, make sure everything works right, and we're going to let this thing heat up to temperature, up to the normal operating temperature. Once it gets there, we're going to turn the heat all the way on full blast to make sure we get a lot of coolant running through that that heater core. And then after it runs for a little while at that temperature, we're going to wait and see if it doesn't leak anywhere, there's no coolant dripping out or anything like that, then we'll go ahead and move to the next step. Guys, I'm not going to lie to y'all, it's getting really dark out here and it's kind of spooky. I can hear some coyotes starting to howl. I don't know if they're coming to get me or not. And also, I think a gremlin just ran by my foot a second ago. So y'all pray for me. Okay, so come to find out, my camera died. So I thought that I was recording all this stuff about me talking about the car and the aftermath and everything, but I guess none of it got recorded because my camera was dead. So, but basically after that last portion that I videoed, I got it all back together, got it all running and everything, you know, and started the car up, and it was fine. You know, there was no leaks anywhere. Nothing smelled like coolant anywhere. I let it run for probably about an hour before I turned the AC on. And the heat was hot, the AC was cold. There was no leaks anywhere. Like I said, I let it run for probably about an hour. Never overheated, no leaks. I burped the coolant system and everything, and it was good to go. It was about 10 o'clock at night when I left, so I didn't really put it on the road and like drive it for very much. I just kind of like drove it around the block and came back, and that was about it. And so anyway, gave the keys to the customer. She had already gone to sleep, had already gone to bed, so I just sent her a text and I left, and then the next morning she got in the car and drove it. And the next day she called me back and she was like, "Hey, I drove this to work and I drove it back." Sorry, I've been working on cars this morning. She said, "I drove it to work and I drove it back, and turns out I'm actually burning even more coolant now. I'm losing more coolant. I don't know what's going on." It's like, well, this doesn't make any sense. And so I went back out there, and guess what? Still no leaks anywhere. I couldn't find a single leak anywhere. I mean, this thing was running good. I had no idea what was going on. You may have already guessed what the problem is by this point, and it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. So I don't really know what comes first. So I don't know if this problem that I'm about to talk about has caused all the other coolant leaks, or if all the other coolant leaks caused this problem. I really don't know what comes first or what came first, but I have a feeling that the other problems with it running low on coolant, and still she's still driving the car. Like there is some times where in between coolant leaks that I would fix, where it would be like 2 or 3 weeks before the customer called me back and be like, "Hey, yeah, it's been leaking ever since. Still leaking." It may have overheated and caused this issue, but you've probably already guessed it by now. But the head gasket was the problem. So the way that I figured that out was I was sitting there and I was trying to get the car to warm up, and I had never noticed it doing this before. I don't know, maybe I just wasn't paying attention or what. I was trying to get the car to warm up, so I was putting my foot on the gas, revving it at about 2 or 3 thousand RPM, trying to get it to warm up, to heat up, to start leaking and everything. Well, when I did it one time, I punched the gas and I looked at the back, and there's a plume of white smoke came out of the exhaust, and I was like, "Ah, you gotta be kidding me! There's no way, no way!" After all this work, I went back there and it was kind of dripping just a little bit, not much, but just like a slow drip out of the exhaust. So I smelled it. Sure enough, it was coolant. The whole time there had never been any coolant in the oil, never been any oil in the coolant. I even pulled out the spark plugs. Usually if you got coolant going into the combustion chamber, usually it'll steam wash your spark plugs and they'll be like super clean and almost like a milky coat, basically like looked like they've been steam washed. So I pulled all the spark plugs out, nothing. No, I mean they looked old, like they didn't look like they were fresh, but obviously, but they really didn't look all that bad. They just looked like regular old spark plugs. Just looked like it was time to change them. Just a little bit of corrosion on there. That's about it. They're still like kind of a brownish color, which is kind of like, okay, maybe there's like a little bit of oil leaking or something like that. I was like, well, crap. So it must be real, real slow leak. So it's got plenty of coolant in here. Let me drive it up to O'Reilly's. I was like, you know what? If the head gasket is gone already, might as well put some head gasket sealer in there and try to save the car, because on these Hyundais, if a head gasket goes, a lot of times it's better to just replace the engine anyway. So I was like, and I talked to the customer and she's like not interested in doing a head gasket. It was probably just going to be a scrap car. So I was like, you know what? Head gasket sealer, a lot of times it's kind of a death note to your car. So if you got a leaky, radiator or something like that, and you put the head gasket sealer in there, it'll run for like 6 months, maybe a year or something like that. It's going to cause more problems in the car. But at this case, the car was about to be scrapped anyway. I was like, you know what? If the customer gets 6 more months out of this car, it'll be worth it. So I figured, after 6 months, customer give them a little bit of time to save up some money for a different car, and they could buy one and everything. So like, okay, whatever. So I drove it up to O'Reilly's, which is probably about 5 miles away, really not that far away. Didn't overheat the entire time, wasn't steaming, nothing like that. I get there and I look at, the bottle on the instructions on the bottle say to wait till it's cool. So I was like, okay, I'll just give it to the customer and let her take care of it. So I drove it all the way back home and still wasn't overheating. Nothing. Like it wasn't losing coolant, nothing like that. And I get all the way back home and I open the hood and I'm about to check the coolant level again because it was fine at O'Reilly. So I'm about to check the coolant level again. When I open the hood, I hear a pow, 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 pow. Like it sounded like a gun going off almost. I'm surprised I didn't get hurt, honestly. And then smoke just started shooting out from underneath the air filter. It was crazy. I was like, what in the world is going on? Like I kind of knew like something has to have happened, the head gasket or something like that. And so I took the battery tray out and everything, and I was looking, and it's the thermostat housing that I had replaced. That was the first thing that I replaced. This thing was cracked again in the same spot. It wasn't just cracked, it was actually blown off. So anyway, that's when I called the customer back out. I let her know, hey, this thing's cooked. We could replace this again, but with the head gasket, I offered to warranty it for her, to replace it under warranty. I said, but honestly, like with the head gasket being the way that it is, you're probably going to be, halfway down the road or something like that, and this thing's going to blow up on you, and you're going to be stuck on the side of the road. So I was like, we can do it if you want to, but like, I don't mind, but honestly, like, it's probably going to be more of a danger to just leave you stranded somewhere. And so she agreed, and she didn't want it. She was like apologetic and everything, which I was like, it's not. This is not your fault. Obviously, none of this is your fault. But I was like, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to help you more. We did everything we could for this car, but it turns out all we were doing was band aids, and that really sucks a lot of times. Fortunately, that doesn't happen every time, but unfortunately, when it does, man, it sucks so bad. It sucks to be. You feel like almost the angel of death, for these cars sometimes when you're talking to customers and delivering bad news. Like it really sucks. I've had cars blow up on me before and have to, buy a whole new car afterwards. Again, and so it just, I don't know. That's the bad part of this job. That's probably my least favorite part of this job, of being a mechanic and dealing with customers, especially being a mobile mechanic. A lot of times techs don't talk to the customers, and there's usually like a go between. But for me, I'm dealing with the customer directly. It's my relationship with them and everything, and I'm having to, deliver this bad news. But anyway, let me know in the comments if there's something I could have done to catch this. I even did a compression test on this thing, and I mean, I didn't catch anything on the compression test. So just let me know if there's anything that I could have done to catch this sooner, or if maybe you think that it happened after all the repairs. Maybe the repairs, it leaking coolant so many times caused the head gasket to go bad. After that thing to explode, I did check the oil again, and now it was mixed. What I think happened, and y'all let me know if I'm wrong or if y'all have a different idea, okay? But what I think happened, there was a little bit of a issue with it overheating, maybe, and it cracked one of the pieces, or maybe one of the pieces started leaking, and that led it to the overheating. There's a little bit of pressure coming into the coolant system from the combustion chamber, just a little bit, not very much, just a little bit, and that was what was pushing this pressure, was causing these leaks to pop up at different places. Once we'd fix one leak, the pressure would build up somewhere else, and it popped something else. Just go to the next weakest link in the chain, and then once we had all the leaks fixed, then it really just, I mean, the hammer just came down on that head gasket. That's what I think happened. Y'all let me know what you think. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hate over this video, of course. Like, this is a pretty touchy subject, of course, but let me know. I'm always learning every day, and hopefully somebody can shed some light on this so I don't make this mistake again. Or if it wasn't my mistake, please let me know. I mean, that would be encouraging to me also, to know that, hey, stuff just happens sometimes, you know what I mean? So if you enjoyed this video, or if you learned something at my expense, go ahead and hit subscribe, like, comment, share with your friends. I'm really trying to get this channel up to 1,000 subscribers. Until you get to 1,000 subscribers, you can't really make any money off of YouTube. So I'm making all these videos for free. I'm even spending money on editing, doing all this stuff for free, and I'm trying to help people out and give people advice, and really help the community out a little bit. So if you could share or subscribe, that would really help this channel out a lot. Really help a lot to build up production quality, and hopefully make better videos in the future. And more videos too. So until next time, stay frosty.